as Stephen introduced, I started a company about 8 years ago. I have a lot of experience in research as my background, but I started working with I worked with a national nonprofit to support data work, and then I worked at Mile High United Way, where I engaged with many nonprofits, and there was limited capacity around data use, or data use was oriented towards just reporting. And I think there's a lot more you can do with data that really serves your mission. We're all about mission today. How do you take what you're trying, that mission, that vision you've created, and then how do you use data to help ensure that you're achieving what you're trying to achieve? So we're really focused, ResultsLab is really focused on how you do that. A little bit more about the company. We do work primarily with nonprofits, also with foundations, but really our vision is to build a world where everyone thrives, and our purpose is to make impact easier. So everything we do is that we think simplify, we think how do we put frameworks in place that I think we've complicated data in a way that it doesn't need to be, and we really want to get it focused back on your mission and how it supports the outcomes and the impact that you're trying to have with the communities that you're serving. So that's where we're oriented. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about some why. If you're already in the room, you probably are already thinking about data, so I may not need to even talk through some of these things. But I'm going to share a little bit about why data can really support your organization. I'm going to share some context about what's happening in the social sector generally, some trends that we're seeing. Then I'm going to talk about a model we use, so all a little bit abstract. Then I'll walk through an example of an organization we've worked with. So we've worked with, the genesis of the idea of how we do our work is based on the work I did in a nonprofit. So kind of learned by doing, learned with that one that was inspiring. And want to continue that. Now we've worked with hundreds of organizations and have found that our framework can really help you grease that data wheel in a way that helps it serve you. So a little bit about the why. I'm also used to walking around, so I hope the video people are okay with that. I'm going to try to hold still. You probably thought about all of these. My favorite one is this. I should put it as either number one or the last one to emphasize it, is we orient to how is your program most effective, and really there's good data behind there's good research behind using data to ensure that your effectiveness is strong. But lots of other really good reasons to think about using data. Certainly it can help you be more efficient with your programming. It can help you think where to put your resources and your resource allocation. Good data, good research behind all of these reasons. It helps with donor engagement. So yes, stories are good. And if you can show, data's not just numbers, by the way, so we'll talk a little bit about that. If you can show that data behind your stories, so stories can be anecdotal or they can be very systematic. Put some numbers to that too. Really helps with donor engagement to drive their engagement with what you're doing. Grant success, for that grant reporting, grant applications that you do. I know you know all of this. Transparency and accountability, and program scaling. So there's good evidence if you're looking to scale. Not everyone is looking to scale, and I don't think everyone should scale. That's up to you, what community you serve, how you're thinking about your program. But using data can really help drive scaling as well. So if growth is something you're looking for, how you use data effectively can help you on that growth path as well. So good reasons, but since you're in the room and you're not listening to how to help yourselves rest, then you're probably already bought in. Really the context is what we want to do here is help you tell your story better. And I think both with qualitative data and with numbers. So the framework we use is focused on both. And I'm gonna walk you through a 3-step process that we use. And often organizations come to us because they say, a couple things. We have a lot of data and we don't know what to do with it. Sometimes that's when they come to us, or they come to us and they say, hey, we want to know how to use data better. And we say, great, let's talk about your mission. And that's kind of confusing, I think, initially to individuals, but we want to ground all of your data practice in what it is you're trying to achieve. So you'll see our model is oriented that way. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Before we go there, before we go to that approach, how many of you feel like fairly, like, are you in the room because you're like, I love data and this is my jam? My God. There's 4 hands, 5, 6. Okay, great. And how many of you are here because you're like, I know this is a thing I have to do and I'm not so sure about it, but I want to see, I want to check this out a little bit more. Give me another reason. Why are the rest of you here? Yeah.
We're growing a whole lot.
Growing.
We want to understand how we can best use all of that data.
Growing a whole lot and want to understand how to best use the data. Yeah.
Funders are really excited about data, so we got to get excited about data.
Ooh, that's a great way to
Yes. What other avenues of data we should be collecting? And funders want the data.
To help with training and developing of other leaders and passing on evaluation process that they can.
Yes, training of up and coming leaders and making sure the processes are in place that can happen. Utilizing data to show your story and impact. One more. Marrying the stories of impact with the qualitative data, quantitative data. Yes. So the what's the what the numbers, and the why, what's behind it. Both sides are important for sure. So you have a card in front of you that you can keep this for orientation into the future. I'm going to ask you to reflect on it in a minute. But there's a pathway, there's elements of a data practice that you may be thinking about, maybe funders have asked for. And so we'd like to talk about this kind of continuum. Anecdotes or stories, that you might have been in a room and you heard from a participant, and that's great, that's information. But it's not systematically captured. So we don't quite put it in the systematic data bucket, but you can systemize qualitative capture. And so you know that whether the theme you heard from that one person is a thread throughout your program. So we want to think about consistencies in how we collect data. But then outputs and outcomes, it's probably language you've heard. Outputs are really what you do. Like the program services you provide, how much you provide, how often you provide, and what that looks like, and how you collect data about that. Outcomes are the results. So what is the impact of people, not impact, sorry, I'm going to get there. What is the result of people being in your program? How did they change as a result of your services? So they may have experienced some things in your program. What did that do? What changed for them as a result of engaging there? So just some language. Impact is then that next step out. So what really, a kind of a future change. So maybe someone is in a financial empowerment program. They learn some practices around data, their own financial management. What did it result for them later on? What's the impact later on for them? So those are kind of elements we start to think about, specifically outputs, outcomes, and impact when we start to parse out data and how we look at data. Really, we want folks to move along this continuum and always be doing the middle two. It's important to be thinking about knowing what your program is, and we'll talk about this in the process we use. Based on a theory, based on your own knowledge, based on research that is out there. What is it that you're doing? And you want to capture some information on that. And I'm sure your funders are always asking, what's the result? What are the outcomes? They want to know that their investment is is really helping catalyze outcomes in the communities that you're serving. That's probably what they're asking for and what you're looking for. So we want to help you move along this pathway through some strengthened data practices, and I'll talk about those. But really, there's some ways to simplify your data practice, ensure what you're doing is equitable and inclusive. So there's ways to capture data that are challenging for your program participants, and there's ways to capture data that are uplifting. So we want to be thinking about that as well. So lots to think about accuracy, simplification, equitable and inclusive approaches to data use. Okay, I'm going to do a little more about context. These are 6 areas. So again, just painting larger social sector context and themes that we're hearing about right now. These 6 pop up for us. Has anyone heard of equitable evaluation? Nope. So a lot of evaluation in the nonprofit space is oriented towards what funders want to know and reporting that information to funders. The Equitable Evaluation Initiative, and where we like to also at ResultsLab orient our guidance with organizations, is orienting your data practice to ensure that everything you're doing with your data practice is oriented towards the folks that you're serving. So the information you're collecting is going to help you serve them better. Because, why are you running your program? It's not because you want to report to funders. At least I hope not. You're doing what you're doing because you want to work with those individuals in your communities. You wanted to address a need that you saw, and you want to ensure that your program continues to orient towards that. So we want to orient a data practice to that as well, to get the information you need to make sure that the good stuff is happening that gets the results you want to see. So the Equitable Evaluation Initiative sort of turns the tables on why we do evaluation to make sure you're always, how's that impacting that end user? How's that impacting the beneficiaries of your program? We always want to orient to that when we think about data. Trust-based philanthropy is another theme. I think similarly, there's an emerging awareness. There's an initiative called the Trust-based Philanthropy Initiative, if you've heard of that. But an element of that, there's a lot in that, but one of the elements there is encouraging funders to think about what they're asking for when they're asking for reporting. And so again, creating some awareness of a system that exists within the social sector of how data gets generated and what's sort of centered as the reason for data use. It historically has been for reporting purposes, and trust-based philanthropy is now also saying, hey, maybe when we're asking for reporting, we're actually not being helpful in some ways. How do we do this a little bit differently? That's a good thing. It's technology. I'm sure you all, you may use everything from an Excel sheet to a system, from Apricot or Salesforce or I forget the new name for social solutions. There are many systems out there. We're seeing more and more. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about technology today, but we're seeing a whole lot of new technologies emerging. I think we're going to see more on AI. There's an AI session this afternoon, but many systems that I think nonprofits have used historically, or what's out there in the technology market, weren't first built for nonprofits, and so we're sort of backing into how we use them, and that can be challenging. But we're starting to see some systems being built, some platforms specifically for nonprofits, so also a good theme. Participatory and collaborative evaluation, that speaks to the theme of inclusive data practice, and I'll try to thread some of that throughout our approach, is how do you, there's a whole continuum from doing data to people to including them in a practice where they might even be helping, your participants might even be helping capture some data and doing learning with you. It depends where your organization is. You might be anywhere on a continuum. But an example there is we've worked with some youth development organizations where part of their programming is to help teach the youth to do evaluation of the program and then analyze the data and talk with the program staff about what the program is doing and what might need to change. So you can really embed data practice in different ways, again, depending on your program and what's right for you. Last two very quickly. Evidence building. For those of you growing fast, this might start to come up for you. We do see a trend in government, federal and state funding towards evidence-based. So there's a continuum of data practice. There's data that used for quality improvement, and that's where we're going to talk most today. And then there's data that proves your program has the impact that you say. So like think of randomized control trial, like you might think of in medicine, can also happen in the social sector. So we're seeing an emergence of interest in when larger funding pools are available, a portion of those are being required by federal and state entities to go to programs that have a proven evidence base. So a quasi-experimental design study or a randomized control trial has happened on a program, and the funding has to go to that. I don't think that's for everyone. If you are in a scaling mode, that might be for you. If you're a smaller organization, I personally don't think it's the right space. I think there's a lot other data practice you can do that's going to serve you on your day-to-day work, rather than having someone come in and do a study of what you're doing and leave a report and leave. That's good in certain instances, but it really depends on what you're hoping for with your program plans. And then impact investing is very related. A number of foundations and sometimes other impact investing funds are interested in more of the evidence side of what your impact is. They want you to collect certain data, sort of like funders, but it's sort of amped up a little bit. What is it that your program is achieving? So they know that their investment is the right investment related to the evidence building. That was very fast through some trends. Any quick questions on that before we keep moving forward?
Someone asked online, some people have funders that would like to remain anonymous. Do you have any recommendations for keeping the client identity anonymous?
So they want to make sure the client identity is... I want to make sure I'm getting the question right. Is there any clarification? Why don't we wait on that one? And maybe you can get a clarification. So.
I don't understand the difference between equitable evaluation and evaluation, other than equitable just being more of like a red flag word now.
Sure. The question was, how does equitable evaluation differ from regular evaluation, other than being a word that gets thrown around now? Fair question. Really, the Equitable Evaluation Initiative was started by a group in California, and now is a group of national funders who are trying to think about how they do evaluation from a foundation space, which often is, what do we want to learn as a foundation about various things? The Equitable Evaluation Initiative is hoping to turn that to, what do we need to learn that's going to best serve beneficiaries on the ground? Those actually aren't always the same thing. That might sound a little abstract, but it's aligning towards the needs of communities is what its intention is. One more.
Could you speak to taking data that is complex, for example, medical data, and making it more palatable to funders and families, that kind of thing? I work for an audiology clinic and speech therapy center, and so we get a whole lot of data about neurology and hearing loss and stuff like that, and we have to turn that into stuff that families who have no idea what this is or people who've never met a deaf person can understand.
The short answer to that is whenever you're presenting data, it should be oriented towards a learning question. What is it you're trying to know about? And what is it, therefore, that you're trying to communicate? So I'm going to walk through our high-level approach, but making sure that you know what's the important information to understand, what are we trying to understand, and then how do you parse your data to answer that question. It simplifies itself when you take that approach, but I'm happy to talk more after on that too. Okay. I'd love for you to just take a minute. I want to make sure we stay on track. You got the card in front of you. Maybe reflect on your organization. Where are you guys? Are you doing anecdotal? I just heard this from a participant. Are you more systematic in collecting information about how your program's delivered? Are you collecting information about outcomes that are happening? Just do a quick reflection, maybe a little bit of chat with your neighbor. And online folks, I hope they have the visual. Okay, I'm going to pull you back so we keep going. I love that you're all talking to your neighbors. That's great. Sometimes you say, talk to your neighbor, and everyone sits there. Okay, I no longer love that you're talking to your neighbors. Now stop. Thank you. We'll get a whistler in the room. Okay. I hope you had some good reflection there. Maybe if we have some time at the end, we'll get a couple shares from that. I want to make sure we keep moving here. So I'm going to walk you through an approach that we take. There's 3 stages. Align, we call it ACT. Align, capture, transform. At a high level, align is all about your vision, your mission, your design, and aligning your team to that. Capture is about how you define what data you need and how you get it, all your systems, all your processes, all that. And transform is where we always want to get folks to in organizations, is actually using that data in a way that's going to help their decision making about their programs. So that's where we are at a high level. There's some steps within each of those. I'm going to talk through those. I want to make sure I got my slide here. Yes. One of the things we joke about, I want to say about transform, is if we know we've done our job, if people are excited about data after working with us, and like whatever else you do, if you now see how it can serve you and you're excited about it, then we're actually thinking about measuring how your excitement level about data, because we're sort of data geeky that way. But that's what we want to see. That really, what we've built with you, what you've built, and what we help you put in place. We're oriented to helping you put it in place. We don't really come in and do it for you. You got a lot of work to do with us. It is to get to that place where data is helping you do your job and the way that you want to do your job. Oops, let me go backwards. Let me go back to the slide a little bit more. A little bit more about each phase. I should have dove a little bit deeper there. In the align phase, has anyone heard of a theory of change? Theory of change. We call it an impact strategy because that's more fun sounding. It's a little more engaging, but it's the same thing. What is it in our align phase? We're helping you really define what's that problem that you're addressing? And who are you addressing it for? Who's your target population? Getting pretty specific. Who It could be anything from geography to demographics to other specifics. You need to be really clear about what the problem is you're trying to solve and who is that a challenge for, and defining that pretty tightly. And then once you've defined the problem and the outcomes you're seeking, so what change you're wanting to see for that, the group that you're working with, the population that you're working with, once you've defined that change, what do you think you need to do to help that change come about? So when people come to us and ask us about what do we do with our data, we don't start with data. We start with, what are you doing? What is your program? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to accomplish that with? What's the change you're expecting to see, and how are you expecting to bring that about? And we get a little bit irritating and poke at you, and there's a lot of program knowledge that your teams probably have, or you yourself has, and we want to get that out of your brains and onto a piece of paper and make sure everybody agrees. You'll be surprised. In most engagements we have, there isn't actually agreement across a program team as to what you're trying to accomplish from an outcome perspective or how you're doing that. And we want to make sure everyone's on the same page, so hence align. But lots of getting super clarity out on a page about your mission, your program design, how you're going to bring about the outcomes, and for who in that phase. And we need all of that because we can't do the next phase, the data piece, without knowing all that detail from you. You guys are the experts. We need to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Then we can help align data to that. So it's then defining the right measures, indicators and measures to say, and I'm going to go through a little bit of an example of this. So this is the abstract part. I'll give a high-level example of a specific organization in a second to hopefully bring it to life a little bit. But really, we need to define the what you need to know from a measurement standpoint. How you're going to get that information could be quantitative, could be qualitative. It better be both. It should be both. Quantitative kind of tells you the what of what happened, and qualitative tells you the why. What are the stories? Why do we care about this? Then we're going to define how you capture that. What are the systems you need? Do you have the systems you need? Do you need to upgrade? Do you have a lot of data? This happens a lot. We do a data audit. You might be collecting a lot of information. We often ask, why are you guys capturing this? And I would say almost every engagement is, there's some data is because we always have is the answer. And don't do it anymore. Like, less is more. Like, focus on what you really need. We kind of go through a trimming process, make sure you're really focused on the right information that's going to help serve you and the right systems to do it. And that might be an Excel sheet. That's fine. Don't think data means you have to have a sophisticated system. It doesn't. It kind of depends where your organization is, the size of your organization, its developmental stage. I would say smaller, younger organizations shouldn't have a data system. That's a resource that you don't need to spend money on. There's better spent in other ways. And then the last phase is, now that we know what we're capturing, how we're capturing it, who's capturing it when. Let me say a little bit more about who's capturing it when. We like to embed, help you think about how to embed information you're capturing in the program services you're already doing. So maybe that's something to think about as you're sitting here. I don't know what all of your programs are, but as you're engaging with the participants in your program, is there a way to just ask some questions throughout that just is more seamless, rather than now we're doing a survey, or now we're doing a whatever. Embedding those questions that you capture that information in your service delivery more systematically, so it's less of a burden on your participants and your staff, frankly. It's just make it part of what you do. So with all of that, then how do you visualize that information? Who needs to see it when? There might be something different for your board versus leadership versus program staff versus information you share with your participants. That probably looks different. And how do you visualize and who's responsible for putting that out there on a consistent basis? So systematic and consistent data reviews, and we love to emphasize leadership modeling. So when you're looking at data, we help coach through how to make meaning of the data you're looking at, because you have a lot of contextual knowledge, and your participants do if you include them, in what that data might mean for you. And then based on what you're seeing, are there any programmatic changes that need to happen, et cetera? So we like to do some coaching around, I was sitting next to someone in the session this morning. She said, rather than a hammer, we want to make data a flashlight. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. How do you put a flashlight and understand where you need some time and attention? And then we want to see the leadership modeling. That leadership then facilitates decision making and change so that your program is improving. So lots about leadership modeling there. Again, that's very quick. Still good on time. Okay. So I'm going to walk you quickly through an example. This is a United Way that we worked with. They have a financial mobility program for their, they work with actually a network of organizations throughout their community. So I'm going to give a little bit of example of some work we did with them. So in the align phase, this one might scare you. Don't worry about that. That's their theory of change. That's to orient them. They were like, are we all on the same page about what we're trying to do? This is their theory of change. And I think the slides are available. I see people taking pictures, but I think they'll be available. But they really like defining through what is the problem? What do we think we're trying to do to address that problem? What are our client outcomes? What are our long-term impact? So really getting clear and making sure everyone is on the same page with what they're trying to accomplish. What we like to see more is the more concise statements. As you go drill down into that, they have 3 components of their program. Those are employment coaching, financial education and coaching, and income supports. So their intent is to help families be more economically mobile and increase their own economic stance. And they do that in different ways, depending on what the families need. So they might need some supports around employment. They might need some supports around how do I do a budget? What is a credit score? How do I even change a credit score? I don't understand credit. Whole bunch there. And then income supports, they might need some sort of assistance. Systems are our means of financial assistance in most communities are pretty difficult to access and navigate, so they help navigate families to get to the right income supports if they need that. They defined these components of their program in their align phase. There's actually much more detail under each of those programs, but we won't have time to go into that today. I'll give you a couple examples in the capture phase here about some things they decided they needed to capture information on. So this is where we're going to, what are their key performance indicators, how did they capture their data, and who's doing it, when, and how. So some example indicators they chose were, and this is around outputs. So what's happening with program delivery? They were thinking through the different components of their offerings to the families that they work with. We want to know things like how many direct counseling contacts did you have? Because our theory of change and our program design says you probably need these 10 over this amount of time. Well, if you only got 2, we can't expect to see the outcomes we want to see. So they said we want to know things like how many contacts for different types of support, how many went to this workshop, how many people completed different milestones that we're looking for, baseline financial assessment, follow-up financial assessment, et cetera. So they're defining things along the way in their program that they need to see happen, because if those things don't happen, they can't expect the results that they're looking for. So that's some examples there. Outcomes they were looking for, again, these are just some examples, is how many then enrolled in education or training. If they got education coaching and helped them get in the right pathway, how many enrolled? How many completed was another also. How many achieved when they did then achieve employment? How many retained that employment for how long? Those are other things they wanted to look at. That tells them, are we getting the outcome we want from supports around a workforce pathway for individuals? Outcomes for financial coaching is how many went from not even having a score, a FICO score, to then they did, and then did we see improvement in that score over time with us? There's a financial well-being score. How many went from negative or 0 to a positive net worth? So they coach around savings and such. So just examples for you. So when we help them define their program, what they measure about program delivery, if you're delivering your program well, these are some of the things we want to start seeing as the outcomes, and then measuring these outcomes as well. In this phase, I'm not going to dive deep into what this organization did, but we really did talk about, do you have the right tools in place to capture this information? The right data points, the right system. Some of that was yes, some of that was no. So how do we help you refine, tighten up, decrease, if possible, what you're capturing, and who's responsible, defining who's the person, who's your data person. We often see, how many in your organization inherited a data role? Are you a data inheritor? There's a few of you. That's frequent. Like, if someone gets assigned the data role, we want to help get those people on the right path and help you be more successful, and provide some coaching about how to do some of the pieces you need to do. So who's responsible, and how's this all getting done? We make sure that gets done. And then we start to talk about how do we intend to use this data, because our last phase with them, I'm just going to show some examples of dashboards they actually have on their website now. They report on a network, so they're not just one site. So this is like a network of organizations that are doing this. And another example of data that they're looking for to share at a high level. And this is more externally facing, board facing, across the network facing. They have other reports they use that are more operational to help them know, did these folks get the right number of coaching sessions or not? They have those reports as well. I think we want to leave about 15. We're almost there. We want to leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I'd love, if you just reflect for a second, I'd love a few share outs of something that's stuck out so far, or something that you're thinking about.
The hammer and flashlight thing is super helpful. I think we have a lot of our staff that feels like data is just a hammer that's coming to them in some respect, and trying to evolve to a place where it feels like a flashlight for a lot of dealers.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the real challenge slash path forward for us.
Yeah, let me so moving from hammer to flashlight, I think, and staff feeling like data is a hammer, I think that's pretty common. We hear that pretty frequently, that data is used in more punitive ways. But if we can get data in the hands of our staff where they're starting to look at it and say, what does this mean for me and my job? Then it becomes more of a flashlight. So it's about how data practice gets done in an organization. Yeah, here, let me just give you this.
I was just going to say similarly, the decreasing of, it's survey time. I loved that you said that, of like how to make it feel more flashlighty because we're doing it along the way instead of, we're having to retroactively hunt people down to fill out this survey for some funder, but how to do it along the way.
Got one back here. I think there's a microphone coming behind.
So we're a small nonprofit literacy program. So we base a lot of our feedback on parent and student surveys. And we do embed some of the questions in, but our problem is like, now that we have all these handouts, papers of surveys, how do we get them into a meaningful database so then we can kind of figure out where we are?
Yeah, and
without it being a fortune.
Sure. Excel spreadsheet. Excel is not, it doesn't cost you much. I'm happy to chat with you after. I think I'd need to see a little bit of what you have, but again, it's orienting to what you're trying to learn from the data, and it'd be hard to get into that detail here, but I'm happy to talk with you. Yeah, here and then there.
So we lead a social justice organization. We're based right outside of Philadelphia, and we do a lot of work with children and families too. Just to offer, SurveyMonkey can be free depending on how you use it, and it really aggregates all the data for you. It's an awesome tool, like just to recommend. And I just wanted to question, like we are working from hammer to flashlight to spotlight, where we trying to make our staff feel like we're celebrating them. And trying to get to a place where we're doing all this great work, so we're already doing the work, but communicating the data in the best way. Because when you're doing like employment training, okay, but when you're mentoring a kid, especially adjudicated youth, okay, this output is, 20 kids showed up, he was connected to a mentor, and he did, 5 hours this month. But then going beyond the outputs to the outcomes, like how did this save this kid's life, prevent him from being shot and killed, prevent him from shooting and killing someone, like communicating that more qualitative, we're changing this kid's life, but we can't really give you the numbers on employment 60, 90, and 180 days. Yeah.
There are short-term outcomes and there are longer-term outcomes. So what is happening while they're in your program? And it doesn't have to be surveys, people. The surveys are fine, but like we've worked with some organizations where we did what are called chalk talks, and the kids came and wrote their thoughts about how the program impacted them and some of them drew pictures. And then we asked them because if you got a little kid, having them do a survey, I don't know, but having them draw a picture and then tell you why they drew that picture, and doing that consistently, that's good data. And then you can summarize. You can show the pictures, you can tell what the kids said as a result of what they drew. And the question would be, what do you like about this? How did this help you? They could be simple questions. They don't have to be complex questions. But I would say collecting that systematically rather than anecdotally. So asking a selection, a random selected group of kids, or all kids in the program, depending about how big your program is. So I think about those shorter term outcomes and how you can more easily get information. It doesn't have to be the 6 years down the road information. Let's do I think we're fully into question time too. So maybe whatever statement you have, and then if you have a question, and I think we need to give some time to the online people questions too. So go ahead.
Well, this may be kind of loaded then. So we're an organization that does a lot of collaborative work with other nonprofit organizations. Can you speak a little bit to the whole ethical data sharing aspect of things, and how do you get buy-in from your other partners? Like, we're going to give you information. We need this information from you to be able to speak to funders about who we're actually serving.
So you mean with the other organizations and data sharing across organizations? It's building trust. I would say anything that has to do with data is trust building, whether it's from your participants or from your partners or with your partners or to your funders, whatever, that trust building needs to be there. I would say being very clear about what the request is and getting that mutual development of what is it we're saying we're going to collect and share together, and how is it going to benefit us collectively. We should get the buy-in. If collectively, then that information is being shared to funders and that somehow benefits partners, helping them see the pathway to that, and being very clear about sometimes it's tough with partners because if you're showing outcomes, some organizations might appear to look better at what they do than others, and that's going to be a challenge. Depending on how your network is set up, this network the example I just gave, they all agreed to share, and they knew each other's they saw each other's data and information, and then they could ask each other, oh, you're doing really well there. What are you doing? And it became a mutual support. And then we're doing better here. Let us tell you what we're doing. That really worked for them. I think because they had the base of trust, and the funder, they had the base of trust with the funder too. So the funder had demonstrated that they weren't going to use that information punitively. They were going to use it to support improvement of all the programs. So whatever your relationship with the funder is, if there's a way to have that conversation with them about how they would use the information. What other questions or thoughts, comments? Sorry, you were supposed to facilitate, weren't you? Yeah.
Dr. Garber rephrased her question, and she said, funders want data plus stories, which include pictures and testimonials, etc., of actual clients. Some clients don't want to be identified. How do you reconcile funder demands for info beyond data with client confidentiality?
That is a tough one, and my recommendation is, again, orienting toward what you as an organization need and want to know and how you engage with your participants. So if a funder comes and asks for certain information, you could say, here's what we collect and here's why we collect it. And we only share information or photos about participants who have agreed. Like that, it should be, if a funder has a problem with that, that's a problem in and of itself. I think sharing that information and just saying the why behind how you're sharing and what you aren't sharing, we've found folks to be really successful with that. If they're just explaining, we collect this, and this is why, and this is what it's going to tell you about our program, and this is stuff we don't do, and this is why. It actually works pretty well. Not with government funders, though, sorry.
Judith Norback, she asked about, could you say a little bit more about participatory and collaborative evaluation? And then when asked to clarify, she said an example could include donor performance analysis, or how much % of donors were lost or gained each year, and basically what are other examples of success as it relates to metrics. Does that make sense?
Sounds like she's asking about donor data, and I've been oriented towards your impact side of the house, your programmatic data. And So participatory and collaborative evaluation is really more about how evaluation is carried out, and how your program participants are engaged in that process and how much they own the process. It can be done to participate in, or they facilitate. That's a really rough continuum. So it's really more about the process. I'm not sure how to answer the question they were asking. Sorry about that.
So in terms of the technology, I think there's probably many like middle-sized organizations, like we're an 8.5-year-old organization where we've been on spreadsheets and we've been starting to ingest into like a Salesforce platform. We've been on Salesforce for CRM, but on our actual impact measurements. It's a super frustrating, we're in this frustrating in between because like the team really can't use Salesforce effectively and the spreadsheet is too unwieldy. So how do you help organizations think through kind of those like transitions, and are there some simpler middle ground solutions that you know of?
Again, right fitting technology to each organization is important. And since you're already using Salesforce on your CRM side, it does make sense to try to use Salesforce on your impact side. Unfortunately, Salesforce was built for other reasons, and so we're retrofitting it. So I don't have a good answer on Salesforce specifically. There are other systems. We've found folks be successful with other technologies like Apricot. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on another one that seems to have been pretty successful. Salesforce tends to be pretty challenging, but are you still in the free space? Like you all know you can use Salesforce with a certain number of users for free, and that can be good. There are some good resources out there of people. I'm happy to, maybe I can even put together a list of folks of who can help coach on the Salesforce side. Unfortunately, I think we still have a white space of almost exactly your scenario, sort of the mid-size organization that's growing, and what are the good systems for them. I don't see a lot of great stuff out there, so I don't have a good answer for you. Apricot's another data system. It was built for nonprofits. It has a two-sided intention also on donor and impact data side. So it's just another technology offering. I don't know. Anyone know how?
Our staff is still struggling with like implementation, and our systems are needing some refinement, but in terms of getting things that have just stacked up in files into a database, it's been really great. And reporting, we're still learning how to use all the features effectively, but in theory the reporting functions are also really great, and you can just pull directly from again, those things that for us were just locked away in file cabinets, like not being utilized. So we've really liked it for that aspect. It costs money, but we partner with another organization that underwrites some of the costs, and we've had some grant makers underwrite some of the costs. So there's ways, if it's a priority, to get funding, and it's been really worth it for us. So
maybe you two can chat after. Maybe you can chat with this guy too. Yeah, one more question.
And I'm super sorry if this is too in the weeds, but I am with a food bank out of Colorado, and we have run into the issue of people being afraid of sharing their data because of immigration status or things like that, which has really prohibited us from being able to report on some of those programs. Have you encountered that, and how have those organizations been able to address it?
And you're saying individuals don't want to share because of their immigration status? Absolutely, that occurs in many places. Again, I would just go back to my previous statement about trust. Don't do anything with data without building a base of trust, and being authentic about that would be my strong encouragement. I don't know that there's a good answer to that one, because there's good reasons that people are not wanting to share information and might be fearful for their welfare. But the other grounding I would want to see in any data practice is a do no harm practice, that you want to be doing good. That's sort of speaking again to that equitable practice. Putting things in place that could be harmful to your participants, or capturing data that is identifiable and you're not protecting it, not good. Be always thinking about the impact of your participants on what you capture. So that's not probably the answer you want, but that's where we are. One more? Can we do one more?
Hi, I'm Melissa from Harlem Grown. Just wanted to offer 2 points. I probably can talk to you briefly about Salesforce. And then we're recently started doing a community survey too, to just try to better capture making sure we're reaching our target population. And in the survey questions, we kind of explored the first few questions we're asking you, does it already sound like we're being invasive? So just details that aren't, like you said, not identifying has been really supportive, where it's clear that there's no way no one would know who you are. This is just to better understand if we're able to and get resources to support you in the services that you need. So, not asking for their address or email or phone number, but just something that's more like whether you need to know gender, or something that's vague at age and family size, but just not who they are personally. I find that's a little bit more helpful, because then they'll know you're not really trying to necessarily harm them, but it's just to get more information so you can get better resources to support them.
That's great. Yeah. If you don't need identifying information, then you don't need to capture it. So if you're not going to use it, don't capture it. All right. Are we good? We're time?